You people should learn one language before serving billionaires. The sentence cracked across the rooftop like winter glass. Conversations died mid-word. A violinist near the Marble Bar missed a note for the first time all night. 42 floors above Chicago, where the skyline glittered like it had been polished for the rich, every eye turned toward the woman holding a silver tray. Nia Bennett didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't offer the apology men like Harrison Cole expected from people they considered smaller than themselves. She simply placed his sparkling water beside the untouched steak, aligned the fork by half an inch, and stepped back with the calm precision of someone who refused to be shaken for free. Harrison smirked. That smile had closed billion-dollar mergers, crushed competitors, and convinced rooms full of investors that arrogance was the same thing as genius. Tonight, it looked even sharper under the chandelier light. Around him sat venture capitalists, foreign partners, and media executives gathered for a $900 million expansion deal. They laughed because he laughed. They always did. Power has a way of borrowing voices. Tell me, Harrison said, leaning back in his chair, loud enough for the room to hear, do you understand any of this, or do you just memorize the specials? A few guests chuckled into their wineglasses. Others looked away, pretending discomfort was sophistication. Nia met his eyes for 1 second. Not long enough to challenge him. Just long enough to let him know she had heard every word. Then she turned and continued serving table 7. That should have been the end of it. But men who are used to applause often mistake silence for surrender. Harrison switched to French, tossing out a phrase to impress a Paris investor. Then Japanese to amuse a tech founder from Tokyo. Then Arabic, then Italian, then Spanish, each line delivered like a party trick, each glance toward Nia inviting the room to enjoy the joke. Laughter rolled across the terrace in polished little waves. Nia paused beside the candle wall. The city wind moved a loose strand of hair near her cheek. She set down another plate, folded her hands, and slowly turned around. When she spoke, the first words came in flawless French. The investor from Paris straightened in his seat. Then Japanese, smooth and exact. The founder from Tokyo lowered his glass. Arabic followed, warm and effortless. Then Italian. Then Spanish. 5 languages, one after another, not rushed, not angry, not performed for revenge. She sounded like truth reminding the room it had been invited. The laughter vanished so completely that even the skyline felt quieter. Harrison's smile didn't fade all at once. It cracked in pieces. But Nia wasn't finished. She stepped to the edge of the table and lightly touched the contract folder beside his hand. And in section 12, she said in English at last, calm as midnight, your translation vendor made a serious mistake. No one moved. If they sign this version, your company gives away international licensing rights for 10 years. A heartbeat passed. Then another. Somewhere below, a siren wailed through the streets. Up on the rooftop, the richest man in the room stared at the waitress he had tried to embarrass, and realized she might be the only person who could save him. No one reached for their drink. No one checked a phone. In rooms built on money, silence usually meant fear. Tonight, it meant calculation. Harrison Cole grabbed the contract folder and flipped to section 12 with the speed of a man trying not to look rattled. His eyes moved once, then again, slower the second time. The color in his face changed by a shade only people close enough to power ever notice. Across the table, the Tokyo founder adjusted his glasses. The Paris investor leaned forward. A legal advisor quietly asked for another copy. Nia stood beside the candle wall with both hands folded, as if none of this belonged to her. But every person in the room now understood the truth. The center of gravity had shifted. Harrison cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but in that silence it landed like thunder. Where did you learn all that? He asked. It was the first honest question he had asked her all night. Nia answered without triumph. Different places. Then she returned to table 7 and replaced a butter knife that no one had touched. Some people are powerful because others agree to pretend they are. Others carry something deeper, the kind that does not need permission. Harrison knew the difference now, and it unsettled him. The legal team began whispering urgently. One mistranslated phrase had nearly handed away a decade of international rights. A mistake that would have triggered lawsuits, headlines, stock drops, and a feeding frenzy from competitors by sunrise. The deal everyone came to celebrate had been standing on rotten wood. Who reviewed this? One board member asked. No one answered. Another investor looked at Harrison the way wealthy people look at risk, cold and immediate. For years he had been the smartest man in every room because no one dared challenge him. But confidence without humility ages fast under bright light. Harrison closed the folder and looked across the terrace at Nia. She was helping an older guest with a chair, steady, professional, almost invisible again. That bothered him more than the mistake. She had no interest in humiliating him back. She had saved him and stepped aside. Mercy can feel heavier than revenge. He rose from his seat. Several guests straightened in surprise. Harrison Cole did not stand for staff. He barely stood for equals. Yet he crossed the marble floor while conversations parted around him. The skyline flashed against the glass walls. Chicago below kept moving, unaware that pride was being rewritten 42 stories up. He stopped in front of Nia. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said the two words his employees had almost never heard. I apologize. The room inhaled as one. Nia studied him, not to punish him, but to measure whether the sentence had cost him anything. Thank you, she said softly. Nothing more. No speech. No lesson. No performance. But Harrison was not finished. I need your help, he said. The word sounded unfamiliar in his own voice. Around them, investors watched like witnesses to an event they would describe for years. Nia glanced at the contract, then at the room that had laughed minutes earlier. You do not need my help, she said. You need someone willing to tell you the truth. He had built an empire on control. Yet standing there under chandelier light, with the city shining beneath his feet, Harrison Cole understood that the most valuable person in the building was the woman he almost ignored twice. Some apologies are spoken to end discomfort. Others arrive like a man setting down armor he can no longer carry. Harrison stood there waiting, not for forgiveness, but for an answer. Around them, investors pretended to study their plates while listening to every breath. Nia picked up an empty glass, placed it on her tray, and spoke with the same calm that had undone the room. Then start with the truth. Harrison nodded once. He returned to the table, but he did not sit at the head this time. He chose the side chair nearest the legal team. It was a small movement. Yet power often reveals itself in where a person believes he belongs. Pause the signing, he said. No theatrics. No sharp tone. Just clarity. Pens were set down. Screens were opened. Attorneys leaned over the revised pages. The Tokyo founder watched Harrison carefully, measuring whether humility would last longer than embarrassment. Across the terrace, the wind pressed softly against the glass walls. Chicago shimmered below in ribbons of white and gold. Inside, a different kind of weather was forming. While lawyers worked through the language line by line, guests could not stop glancing at Nia. A woman who had laughed earlier now asked for her name with sudden politeness. A venture capitalist offered a business card she did not take. A media executive whispered that she should be on television. Nia thanked each of them the same way she thanked everyone else, with professionalism untouched by flattery. She knew something many wealthy people never learn. Respect offered only after usefulness is still a late payment. 40 minutes passed. The corrected contract was clean, fair, and worth more than anyone in the room wanted to admit. The deal was saved, but the atmosphere had changed beyond repair. The old script was gone. Harrison signed last. When the final page was complete, applause rose across the rooftop, hesitant at first, then full. Not for the merger. For the moment. For the reversal. For the rare sight of arrogance being interrupted by truth. Harrison did not join the applause. He looked at Nia instead. "Would you sit with us for 1 minute?" he asked. Fork stopped again. No server had ever been invited to that table. Nia considered the room, then set down her tray beside the service station. She took the empty chair nearest the window. Several guests shifted in visible discomfort, as if hierarchy itself had been asked to move over. Harrison noticed. "Everyone here speaks about global markets," he said, voice steady. Tonight, the most globally minded person in this room was carrying water. No one laughed this time. He turned to her. "Who are you, really?" It was not suspicion now. It was wonder. Nia folded her hands. Someone who had responsibilities. Her eyes drifted toward the skyline, but what she saw was somewhere else entirely. A smaller apartment. Hospital bills stacked on a kitchen counter. Library books with worn covers. Night classes after double shifts. Audio lessons playing through cheap headphones on crowded buses. "I was accepted into an international language program at 19, she said. I declined. The room leaned closer without meaning to. My mother got sick that summer. My younger brother was 14. So I worked." There was no self-pity in her voice. Only fact. The kind of fact that makes excuses sound expensive. Harrison stared at the woman he had reduced to a joke and felt the shape of his own ignorance more clearly than ever. Success had taught him how to win. It had never taught him how little he knew about the people standing beside him. The rooftop no longer sounded like a celebration. It sounded like reflection. Glasses touched more softly. Conversations dropped their swagger. Even the city lights beyond the windows seemed less interested in wealth and more interested in what wealth had just learned. Harrison remained seated beside Nia, not across from her. That detail did not go unnoticed. Men who had once copied his posture now copied his silence. A board member finally spoke. "Why would someone with your ability stay in hospitality?" It was asked politely, but beneath the polish sat the old assumption that talent and service could not live in the same uniform. Nia answered before offense could enter the room. "Because work is work," she said. "And dignity does not disappear when a person wears a name tag." Several eyes lowered to their plates. Truth has a way of finding exactly where to land. She explained that after her mother passed, medical debt did what illness often does long after the funeral. It kept collecting. Her younger brother needed tuition. Rent never paused out of sympathy. So she took 2 jobs, studied at night, and learned languages anywhere she could. Bus rides. Break rooms. Laundromats. Waiting in line at grocery stores. 15 minutes is enough time to learn something if you stop wasting it, she said. The Tokyo founder smiled for the first time all evening. The Paris investor nodded slowly, as if recognizing a colleague rather than a server. Harrison listened without interrupting. That alone surprised everyone who knew him. He had built a reputation on finishing other people's sentences, correcting experts, and treating patients like a weakness. Yet now he sat still, absorbing each word as if it were expensive. Maybe it was. "Did no one ever offer you the right opportunity?" asked the media executive. Nia gave a small smile. Many people offered opportunity. Few offered respect. The sentence moved through the room like a cold breeze. Some truths do not need volume. They arrive and rearrange furniture inside people. Harrison looked down at his hands. Those hands had signed deals, pointed at charts, dismissed employees, and controlled rooms with a gesture. Tonight they looked less certain. He remembered dozens of faces he had never learned, assistants he never thanked, drivers he never greeted, servers he had spoken around instead of to. Success had given him altitude, but not vision. Across the table, one investor tried to recover the old mood. Well, this turned into quite the leadership seminar. A few nervous laughs followed. Nia did not smile. Harrison did not either. No, he said quietly. It turned into accountability. Silence returned, but this time it was earned. He stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling. Windows. Chicago stretched beneath him in grids of light, millions of stories moving at once, most of them invisible to men in towers. He had always loved the view because it made him feel above everything. Tonight it made him feel small in the healthiest way possible. When he turned back, his expression had changed. Less polished. More human. I have spent years building systems that scale, he said. But I failed at the smallest system of all. How I treat people one by one. No one reached for a drink now. No one checked a message. The room knew something larger than business was happening. Harrison walked back to the table and faced Nia fully. If I asked for your help tomorrow, not with a contract, but with changing the culture of my company, would you even consider it? Every person there waited for her answer, because for the first time that night, the future belonged to the woman everyone had almost ignored. The question hung over the rooftop longer than any contract term ever had. Investors who managed billions leaned forward for the answer of a woman who had arrived carrying water and clearing plates. Nia did not rush. She looked at Harrison the way people look at unfinished bridges, measuring whether they can hold weight. I would consider it, she said at last, if you understand that changing culture is not branding. A few executives shifted in their seats. They knew the difference. One costs money. The other costs ego. Harrison nodded slowly. Then teach me the difference. No one in the room had ever heard him use that phrase. Not in interviews. Not in board meetings. Not in private. Men who climb quickly often confuse instruction with weakness. Yet there he was, asking to learn in front of everyone who once admired his certainty. Nia stood from the table and picked up her tray. First lesson, she said, the people closest to the problem usually speak the least because they learned no one listens. She turned toward the service station. Ask your assistants what slows them down. Ask your reception team what clients complain about. Ask your janitors what gets ignored. Ask your interns what everyone pretends not to see. She glanced back once. Then believe them. The rooftop stayed silent because everyone knew she was right. Companies spend fortunes hiring consultants to tell them what their own employees already know. Pride is often the most expensive item in the budget. Harrison walked beside her toward the service corridor, surprising the room again. He carried her empty tray without being asked. Cameras from a few guests lifted discreetly, then lowered. Even they sensed some moments should be witnessed, not exploited. Near the kitchen doors, the hotel manager appeared, pale and apologetic. He had watched the evening unravel from a distance, uncertain which side power was on. Ms. Bennett, he began, we can rearrange your shift if you need a break. Nia thanked him kindly. Harrison spoke before the manager could continue. She will be compensated for every extra minute tonight created by my behavior. The manager blinked. So did everyone nearby. Accountability sounds simple until someone wealthy tries it in public. In the hallway, away from chandeliers and polished applause, the building felt ordinary again. Stainless steel counters. Warm kitchen lights. The smell of bread and coffee. Places where work happened without speeches. Harrison set down the tray. I mean it, he said. Come to my office tomorrow. Help me fix what I built wrong. Nia tied back a loose strand of hair and considered him. I am not interested in becoming your symbol, she said. Do not place me in a brochure. Do not use me in a speech. Do not hire me to prove you learned something. Each sentence landed clean and sharp. Harrison accepted every one. Then what would you accept? She answered immediately. Authority. Access. The freedom to tell the truth when it is inconvenient. For the first time in years, Harrison smiled without strategy. It looked unfamiliar, but better. Done. She shook her head lightly. Promises are cheap in expensive rooms. He glanced back toward the rooftop where investors still waited under crystal light. Then come watch me prove it. Nia checked the time on the clock above the prep station. Her next table was due dessert in 3 minutes. Life had not paused because a billionaire had changed his tone. She picked up fresh menus and started walking. Tomorrow at 8, she said without turning around. Harrison stood there in the service hallway, surrounded by the machinery of everyday work, realizing the most important meeting of his career would begin before sunrise. At 7:58 the next morning, the top floor of Cold Dynamics looked exactly like power imagined itself. Glass walls. Quiet elevators. Coffee that cost too much. Screens glowing with numbers large enough to change cities. By 8 o'clock, every executive had taken a seat in the strategy boardroom, each one expecting another polished meeting full of forecasts and polished language. What they did not expect was the woman walking in with a plain notebook and shoes made for standing 10-hour shifts. Nia Bennett entered beside Harrison, not behind him. Heads turned so sharply it almost sounded choreographed. She wore no designer label, no title badge, no attempt to resemble the room. Confidence rarely needs costume. Harrison remained standing. Before we begin, he said, I owe this company the same truth I owed last night. The board exchanged guarded looks. Truth had never been a regular agenda item. We almost lost an international deal because I trusted status over substance, he continued. The person who caught it was not one of us. She was someone I failed to respect. No one moved. Even the usual keyboard tapping stopped. Harrison looked toward Nia. Starting today, Ms. Bennett has full authority to conduct an internal review of how this company treats people, solves problems, and ignores both. A vice president spoke first. With respect, what qualifies her to evaluate corporate operations? It was a clean sentence carrying a dirty assumption. Nia answered before Harrison could. Nothing qualifies me more than seeing what you no longer notice. The room stiffened. She opened her notebook. No slides. No branding. Just pages of handwritten observations. Your reception desk receives client complaints no one logs because they seem too small. Your assistants spend hours fixing calendar conflicts created by executives who do not read their own schedules. Your janitorial staff reports broken equipment. Through 3 layers of approval, so repairs arrive late and cost more. Your interns know which managers create turnover, but no one asks them because they are temporary. Each line landed with surgical calm. Faces changed around the table. Some defensive. Some embarrassed. A few relieved. Hidden truth often feels like insult to people who benefit from silence. She continued. You measure productivity in spreadsheets and miss the drag caused by disrespect. You lose talent before they resign. You lose ideas before they are spoken. You lose trust one careless interaction at a time. No one interrupted now. Harrison watched his own company described more clearly in 5 minutes than by years of expensive consulting reports. A senior executive folded his arms. And your solution? Nia met his stare without heat. Listen lower in the building. She wrote 3 words on the whiteboard in clean block letters. Access. Accountability. Response. Open direct channels for frontline employees. Track patterns, not just profit. Reward managers for retention and trust, not only output. Remove leaders who confuse fear with standards. The room absorbed it in silence. This was not theory. It was oxygen entering a sealed space. Harrison turned to the chief operating officer. Implement a pilot program today. The officer blinked. Today. Harrison did not look away. Today. Then he faced the board. If anyone here believes dignity is separate from performance, this is your moment to disagree out loud. No one spoke. Some because they had changed their minds. Others because the room had changed around them. After the meeting, executives filed out slower than they entered. A few stopped to introduce themselves to Nia properly. Others could not meet her eyes. Harrison remained by the window, the city bright beneath them. You were right, he said quietly. I built a machine that could move fast and still miss people. Nia closed her notebook. Most machines do, she said. Then she handed him the first page. At the top was a title written in black ink. Things you cannot see from the top. By noon, the building had started behaving differently. Doors opened faster. Greetings sounded less automatic. Assistants who were usually spoken past were suddenly being asked real questions. Some changes were sincere. Others were theater. Nia could tell the difference in 3 seconds. She spent the morning moving through departments no executive had visited in months. Shipping. Support. Facilities. Reception. She listened more than she spoke, and people noticed. Not because she carried authority, but because she carried attention. There is a difference. In customer support, a team lead admitted that new hires quit within 90 days because supervisors treated mistakes like character flaws. In facilities, a maintenance worker showed her a list of repairs delayed so long they now cost triple. At reception, a coordinator quietly explained that clients often arrived frustrated before meetings even began because senior leaders changed schedules without warning, then blamed the front desk for confusion. Small disrespects. Repeated daily. Expensive in ways spreadsheets never capture. Nia wrote everything down. Upstairs, rumors spread faster than policy. Some employees called her a genius. Others called her a publicity stunt. A few managers complained that Harrison had lost perspective. Whenever people benefit from old systems, fairness sounds radical. At 2:15, Harrison asked her to join a leadership lunch with department heads. She accepted on one condition. No private dining room. He agreed. They met in the employee cafeteria where interns, engineers, accountants, and janitors all shared the same tables. Trays clattered. Ice machines hummed. It was the most honest room in the building. Executives looked uncomfortable carrying their own lunch. Good. Growth often begins with mild inconvenience. Harrison stood beside the coffee station instead of taking the central seat. Today we listen, he said. Then he sat down among everyone else. Questions came slowly at first, then all at once. Why were promotion rules unclear? Why did managers get rewarded for burnout? Why were entry-level ideas ignored until repeated by senior voices? Why did some teams feel invisible unless there was a crisis? No one shouted. They did not need to. Calm truth can be louder than outrage. One young analyst, barely out of college, spoke with trembling hands. I stopped sharing ideas in meetings because my manager jokes every time I talk. The table fell silent. The manager, seated 3 chairs away, stared at his tray. Harrison did not rescue him. Accountability does not mean protecting comfort. You will address that today, Harrison said evenly. Then he looked at the analyst. And you will present in the next strategy session with me in the room. Across the cafeteria, heads lifted. People were not just hearing promises. They were watching consequences. After lunch, emails went company-wide announcing direct reporting channels, anonymous feedback protections, manager reviews tied to retention, and open office hours with leadership every Friday. The responses flooded in within minutes. Stories of overlooked ideas. Preventable waste. Quiet excellence. Avoidable harm. The company had not lacked talent. It had lacked ears. Near sunset, Nia returned to the boardroom windows where the city glowed amber beneath the clouds. Harrison entered carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the cafeteria instead of the executive lounge. Another small change. Another real one. He handed her 1 cup. "I thought fixing culture would take years," he said. Nia looked out over the streets below. "It will," she replied. "But people know in one day whether you mean it." He nodded, then glanced at the notebook in her hand. "What else can I not see from the top?" Nia turned to a fresh page and wrote 1 more line before sliding it toward him. "The cost of being underestimated." The next morning, the inboxes of Cold Dynamics filled with something rarer than praise. Honesty. Hundreds of messages arrived before 9 o'clock. Some were short and careful. Some were pages long, written by people who had waited years to be heard. An engineer described a product flaw dismissed 3 times because she was the youngest in the room. A receptionist explained how executive lateness damaged client trust every week. A warehouse supervisor listed simple safety improvements ignored because no one in headquarters had ever visited the loading dock. Hidden problems. Hidden talent. Hidden cost. Nia read each message with the same focus she once gave language lessons on crowded buses. Harrison read beside her in silence. By noon, he looked older in the best possible way. Not weaker. Wiser. "How did I miss this much?" he asked quietly. Nia closed 1 email and opened another. "Because success can become insulation," she said. "When every inconvenience is handled for you, you stop noticing what inconvenience feels like." The sentence stayed with him all day. At 1:30, a quarterly investor call began. Usually Harrison opened with confident forecasts and market dominance. This time he opened with accountability. Analysts expected numbers. They got honesty. "We are improving internal systems that have slowed innovation," he said. "That includes leadership behavior, communication failures, and missed insight from frontline teams." The line went still for half a breath. Then questions came faster than usual. Was there instability? Was management changing? Was this damage control? Harrison answered each one without hiding behind jargon. No company becomes stronger by pretending it has no blind spots. On the trading floor downtown, the stock dipped for 11 minutes, then recovered by closing bell. Markets, like people, can respect courage when they recognize it. Inside the office, reactions were louder. Some executives admired the move. Others worried transparency would invite scrutiny. They were correct. It would. Good systems survive scrutiny. Weak ones fear it. Late that afternoon, Nia visited the customer service floor again. The same analyst who had spoken in the cafeteria was presenting a process idea to senior staff. Her hands still trembled, but her voice did not. A maintenance request system was already being redesigned. Reception had direct scheduling authority for executive calendars. Small changes on paper. Life-changing changes in practice. Respect often arrives disguised as process. Near sunset, Harrison found Nia in an empty conference room reviewing feedback charts taped to the wall. No assistants. No entourage. Just 2 chairs, dry erase markers, and work. He placed a folder in front of her. "This is an offer," he said. She did not open it. Immediately. "Then say it out loud." He took a breath. Chief Culture and Strategy Advisor. Full executive access. Independent reporting authority. Compensation equal to any vice president. Nia studied him carefully. "And if I disagree with you in front of your board?" "Especially then," he replied. She opened the folder. The number inside could have changed her rent, her future, and her family's life in one signature. But she looked at the title longer than the salary. People who have struggled know money matters. They also know money is not the only thing that does. I have one condition, she said. Harrison almost smiled. I assumed you would. She placed the folder back on the table. We create a scholarship program for employees and their families. Night classes, certifications, language training, tuition support. Opportunity should not depend on who can afford to wait. Harrison looked at her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Done. She shook it once, firm and steady. Outside the glass wall, the city lights blinked on one by one. Inside, a waitress who had been mocked less than 24 hours earlier had just rewritten the future of a billion-dollar company. 3 months later, the top floor of Coal Dynamics still had glass walls and expensive coffee, but it no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a workplace. Reception complaints had dropped by half. Employee retention had climbed. Customer satisfaction hit its highest score in 5 years. Meetings started on time because leaders were now expected to respect other people's calendars, not just their own. The scholarship program launched with more applications in 1 week than anyone predicted. Warehouse staff enrolled in certification courses. Administrative assistants began language classes at night. 2 interns earned full tuition support. Opportunity, once trapped behind polished doors, had started moving through the building like fresh air. Nia Bennett did not become softer with success. She became clearer. She challenged waste, questioned ego, and ended meetings whenever people confused volume with intelligence. Some executives loved her. Some feared her. Most learned from her. Harrison changed too, though not in the dramatic way headlines prefer. He listened longer. Interrupted less. Learned names. Visited departments without cameras. Thanked people whose work had once been invisible to him. Real growth is often quiet. It does not announce itself. It repeats itself. One Friday afternoon, the company hosted an open forum in the cafeteria where it had all begun. Folding chairs replaced reserved seating. Executives stood beside interns. Engineers sat near janitors. No one was assigned importance by table placement. Harrison stepped to the microphone, then paused. Before we celebrate results, he said, I want to acknowledge something harder. We did not improve because leadership had all the answers. We improved because leadership finally listened. Applause filled the room, but he turned toward Nia before it peaked. And because one person refused to let talent stay hidden. She shook her head slightly, almost amused. Then she walked to the microphone herself. No, she said. This company changed because many people were already carrying solutions. Someone just opened the door. The applause that followed sounded different. Fuller. Shared. After the event, as sunset painted the windows gold, Harrison and Nia stood near the same skyline that had witnessed their first collision. Do you ever think about that night? He asked. Nia smiled into the glass. Sometimes. And? She glanced at him. I think you were lucky I was working. Harrison laughed, the kind that no longer needed an audience. Down below, thousands of people hurried home, chasing bills, dreams, children, second jobs, and tomorrow. The city kept proving the same lesson every hour. Greatness rarely arrives wearing the title people expect. Sometimes it carries a tray. Sometimes it sits at the front desk. Sometimes it clocks in before sunrise and leaves after everyone else. My honest view is this: the fastest way to lose wisdom is to rank human worth by job title, income, or appearance. The smartest voice in the room is often the one no one thought to ask. Respect should not be earned only after someone proves useful. It should be the starting point. What do you think matters? More in leadership, authority, or humility? And have you ever seen someone underestimated change everything? Disclaimer. The stories shared on this channel are fictional and created purely for entertainment purposes, as well as to convey lessons about human behavior and interactions, regardless of race, religion, or background, promoting a life of equality and compassion. Any resemblance to real events, people, or places is purely coincidental.